It is March 2021, and we are back with a monthly forecast. Thank you to everyone at my Instagram for picking my fashion once again. I need the help with it. And Sailor Moon won again. So we're rocking the second Sailor Moon tee in a row. Let's jump right into your first transit. So the first transit happens on March 3rd, and we have Mars moving into Gemini. Mars is a sign of conflict and carnality, drive, ambition, assertion, the ego, and it's sitting now in a Mercury-ruled mutable sign, Gemini. So what does that mean? There's some pros and cons to it for sure. First things first, given the buildup of fixed energy, which all of us astrologers have been talking about this year, I'm actually really excited about Mars being, such a formidable planet to be aware of in regards to what it rules, moving into a mutable sign, because mutability has to do with flexibility. In my opinion, Mars in Gemini for this year could very well signify the ability to make compromises in a very fixed year. Of course, those compromises need to be rooted in high-minded Mercurian themes, communication needing to really be the brokerage of those compromises. And given Gemini's association with narrative and storytelling, it's especially important for the compromise to be rooted in fact and also to be rooted in logic and reason. Gemini is an air sign as well, so that logic and reason, of course, factors in there. That is truly the only way for compromise to be achieved under Mercury and Gemini, because shadow Gemini would take that storytelling and that narrative and really weaponize it, unfortunately. So I actually don't think that is the case. I think there is the potential to broker compromise under this energy. Another really high-minded vibe outside of the conflict side of things is that Mars in Gemini is a really great time to be courageous with writing, with taking on all Mercury world themes in regards to how you communicate. If you are a writer and you have been writing, this is a really great energy to dive in head first, or to take courageous steps as to whether that could be hiring an editor or allowing someone that you trust to look at your work to help process ideas with. It could be the time to bring in some major graphic organizer, or really just dive in head first however you see fit. If you've been meaning to write, this is the time just to put pen to paper and see what comes out. Absolutely, the activation would be there with Mars and Gemini. So just 2 days later, what's really important to note about Mars entering Gemini is that we'll have Mercury conjunct Jupiter on March 5th. And why this is important is because when Mars is in the sign of Gemini, it's going to answer to Mercury, which is sitting on top of, or just kind of blended in with, Jupiter. Just like I'll repeat the themes of Mercury, which has to do with thinking and communicating, Jupiter is all about beliefs and conviction, in addition to growth and expansion. So when I talk about that need to compromise and really root it in logic and reason and facts, unfortunately, Mercury-Jupiter is a pretty conflated time of thinking and of communicating. That is the shadow vibe of the transit. The positive vibe of the transit, like I mentioned with Mars entering Gemini, is really an immediate jumpstart to diving into all those mercurial pursuits of writing, of communicating in various ways. It could also be through this means with all the Aquarian energy. And by this means, I mean, through the internet, through the YouTubes, through the TikToks, however you may, whatever fits your fancy in that regard. Mercury, ruling thinking and communicating, sitting on top of and blending in with the planet of growth and expansion, really expands the capability of your ability when it comes to those things. However, subjectivity could very well be high, given the fact that when we think, we are in our own head. And with that growth and expansion that Jupiter can bring, it very well can only conflate the ability to hype yourself up and say, you're right, you're right, you're right, and not really root it in that logic. So facts are always important, but especially during this week. I would say whenever you get into an argument for the first week of March, it's really important to ask to see receipts, to ask to see sources. Make sure you're checking your sources. Don't be believing everything you read on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. I don't really get my news from Instagram, so I'm going to remove that. But I know for myself, I see links to articles on Twitter. I'm not really on Facebook that much. And it's so important for me to be fact checking that. So that is kind of one flag that I definitely want to flag for the first week of March is fact checking your sources. And also when you are passionately arguing your case, debating someone, or expressing a point, make sure it's rooted in fact. So on March 10th, we have the Sun conjunct Neptune, which is truly a beautiful day for spiritual practice. It's a beautiful day to walk your children in nature. You don't have children, walk a dog. If you don't have a dog, walk your cat. If you don't have a cat, walk yourself in nature, okay? It's a beautiful day to really connect to the collective and the connectedness of us all, if you will. Neptune is really about the disillusion of the ego. And the ego is what separates us. So this is absolutely a day to connect to your fellow human being, to connect to your fellow living thing, to connect to Mother Earth herself. I think that is truly the most positive, beautiful aspect of this day and this transit. However, Neptune can breed dissociative behavior. And so the way in which we might the way in which we seek to dissolve the ego or remove ourselves from the ego could be through unhealthy coping mechanisms. So if that is something you struggle with in regards to dissociation, it's really important to check that behavior today. And that's why I say using this energy, leveraging this energy in a constructive way, walking in nature, doing something that honors your spiritual practice. Another way could be, just in regards to the connectiveness, could be reaching out to 5 people that you haven't really spoken to, given that we're a year into this pandemic, and connecting with them. This day is about connection, connecting to Earth, connecting to living things. So beautiful day. So the next important date is actually the new moon on the 13th. So let's take a look at that chart. Awesome. So here we have the new moon chart. And as you can see, the new moon occurs when the sun and the moon are at the same degree of the same sign. And so for a Pisces new moon, of course, they're in Pisces, they're at 23 degrees of Pisces. So if you happen to have placements at 23, roughly 23 in any sign, but preferably a water or a mutable sign, there's definitely going to be a Ptolemaic aspect that's forming here. Important to note as well that as you can see, this new moon is conjunct Neptune, and just as Venus is forming a conjunction to Neptune. So there is some Instagram filter stuff going on right here. And what I mean by that is just like with an Instagram filter, what you would hope to achieve is a very dreamy kind of vibe to it, an aspirational vibe, if you will, very much I find Instagram filters to be very compassionate, and there is very much a compassionate vibe to this new moon as well. All in all, to say this is a new moon that really wants you to dare to dream. Important to note that objectivity is not the strong suit of this new moon, so subjectivity is high. As a result of that, that's not always a negative. We're dealing with Pisces, which sits opposite Virgo. Virgo is all about practicality, is all about fine details, is all about utilitarianism, if you will, versus Pisces, which is the dreamer. It's the aspirational. It's the mystic. It's the mystical, I should say. And so in dealing with this, there is a dare to dream energy. And given the fact that we are just days away from the spring equinox, this is the perfect time for you to whip out that vision board and really vision board what you hope to accomplish in the next 12 solar seasons as the sun goes back through all 12 signs. I really do love this new moon actually for that capability. Very aspirational. The other thing that I would note on a personal note is I actually just got my first Vedic reading ever. I'm a tropical astrologer, and I got my first sidereal reading, which was really, really cool, super informative. I have such reverence and deference for those who are sidereal astrologers. And my astrologer was telling me that actually each of the visible planets correlate to a different chakra. And for Jupiter, it would correlate to the sacral chakra, which has so much to do about passion and creativity. So this is a beautiful new moon tied to those themes about what you would seek to manifest in regards to your passions and your creativity. If you do work with the chakras, I do really invite you to meditate on the sacral chakra for this new moon. It would be a beautiful way to honor such a Jupiter-ruled sign. And I use traditional rulership. So I say that Jupiter would be the ruler of Pisces. Important to note from the modern standpoint, that would be Neptune, and Neptune is conjunct this new moon, really inviting you to dream and inviting a lens of compassion as well. So just like I said with the new moon chart, there's a Venus-Neptune aspect that is applying. So it's Venus conjunct Neptune, which is exact on March 14th. With Venus, we have the planet of value and intimacy, beauty and self-worth, sitting on top of or kind of blended into Neptune, which is everything to do with compassion, spirituality. There's creativity for sure related to Neptune, but there's also egolessness and formlessness and even disassociation associated with Neptune. All of this to say it's a pretty rose-colored glasses kind of transit. So for this entire week, given the fact that the transit has several days of applying and several days of separating, it's a very rose-colored glasses week. So for you, it's important to root yourself in your value system to kind of mitigate this, if you will. However, the dare to dream energy of the new moon is only augmented by this exact conjunction. In my opinion, I think just in speaking to the first part of March being very Mercurian with the influences of Mars entering Gemini, I think this is a really great way to get creative with your Mercurian pursuits. If you're still working on that writing, which I imagine a week later you're not, or you're trying to figure out how to go about your writing, creativity does spike with the Venus conjunct Neptune. So it's a great time to get creative in any form of creative self-expression. I'd say shadow vibe of this transit would be the lack of boundaries that can form, especially in regards to flirtation or networking, getting to know someone. So it's very important that there's some sort of litmus test involved, or just some way in which you slow yourself down, taking it slowly, not taking things at face value, and really getting to know a person authentically and all sides of that person. However, once again, a beautiful dreamy transit that has plenty of splashes of creativity into it. So this is a beautiful week to really get creative. So on March 15th, one day later, we have Mercury entering Pisces. And what's really interesting is that Mercury technically struggles in the Jupiter-ruled signs of Sagittarius and Pisces, primarily because Jupiter is all about big picture thinking, growth, and expansion. And Mercury actually really cares about the fine details. What's so interesting is that I actually don't think that Mercury technically struggles in Pisces, but the way in which it communicates and thinks is just different. It's Piscean. And I immediately default actually to music. Music as a coping mechanism, music as a stimulus for creativity, even music as a form of communication. I think that it's a great time to lean into your old favorites. Music is sacred to me. I am very much a metalhead. I love metal, and that's kind of unique and weird for my age and demo. I haven't found many people who listen to my type of music, and I know I utilize my music as a coping mechanism, and also it stimulates my creativity, and it's a form of communication, both receptive and expressive. So I would really strongly recommend with this energy, with this transit, leveraging this energy by going back and leaning on your music. Really, you could definitely take advantage of TBTs, Throwback Thursdays, and think about, what were your favorite songs X number of years ago? See where that takes you. Pisces is really a dreamy, kind of theoretical. It is all about a good daydream. So I would sit back and relax in the bath to your phone on shuffle and see where it takes you. Mercury in Pisces also would contribute to creativity as well, of course, as with everything in Pisces. However, it isn't very directive. It's not a straight line. There's two left shoes on your feet. And I think it's worth just putting pen to paper, like I said, in just how Pisces season operates. It's all about putting pen to paper and seeing what comes out. And that is very true when Mercury enters Pisces as well. Mercury in Pisces is a beautiful, beautiful transit when it comes to getting in touch with the special ways in which you can communicate. Maybe not the most direct and the most straightforward ways, but the most poetic for sure. Poetry is very much a Mercury in Pisces kind of vibe as well. So on March 20th, it's Aries season. Happy New Year. It's the spring equinox and the birth of a new year from the zodiacal standpoint. So the sun enters Aries. And I have to say, one of my favorite things about Aries as a sign, as an archetype, is its take charge mentality and attitude. Especially given the fact that there's this buildup of Pisces energy with Mercury, Venus, and Neptune all being in Pisces. It's really nice to have the sun be in a cardinal sign where one foot can go in front of the other. Some of my closest friends are Aries, especially for that reason of just being able to put a plan together, being able to take action, decisive action, being able to make a decision when others can't. I think about an example, actually. One time I was at a pretty sketchy bar, in the back of it at an open mic, a comedy open mic. I didn't need to be there anymore. I was watching the comic on stage who was making me very uncomfortable. And I was so uncomfortable that I kind of just froze. I didn't know what else to do. And my friend who's in Aries, she's double Aries actually, was getting ready to leave and saw this. And she just very gently grabbed my wrist and said, "We're going." And she was able to take the decisive action my Pisces rising butt was unable to do. And she got me out of that really sketchy open mic in that sketchy bar. And that's a great example of really high-minded Aries, which is not only taking decisive action for themselves, but for their friends, their loved ones, people at large in general. And that's what I really, really strongly recommend leaning into is high-minded Mars themes of courage and ambition and drive. And assertion, not aggression, but assertion. In the ingress chart, meaning in the chart for the sun moving into the sign of Aries, the sun will be conjunct Venus, which is beautiful and to me speaks to a hopefulness for this solar season. So the next 2 days after the sun moves into Aries, there's two additional transits. Venus entering Aries on the 21st, and then Mars trine Saturn on the 22nd. And let's go back to back on these. First of all, Venus is technically uncomfortable in the Mars-ruled signs of Aries and Scorpio. And that's because Venus likes to bend towards or prefers security and harmony to being daring and also to confrontation, to be completely honest with you. And Venus in Aries is all about that confrontation. And that's not always a negative. Venus in Aries would definitely say, "I love you" first. And it doesn't get enough credit for that. I will say, of course, given the fact, like with everything, there of course is a shadow vibe to this energy. And that would simply be the fact that things might feel a little more edgy. The planet that does rule harmony and does rule that security mindset is in a sign that would prefer to say it how it is and may not have a filter about it and be confrontational. So I think that there absolutely is an inflammatory quality that can come with this transit, especially depending upon how it hits your chart. However, Venus in Aries should not be viewed as a negative, whether natally or in transit. If anything, it could very much catalyze having those hard conversations in the very intimate relationships that you have. So on the 22nd, we have Mars trine Saturn, and honey, this is get a project done energy. Mars, I've already said what the significations for, but I'll say it again, has everything to do with drive, action, assertion, conflict, carnality, courageousness, is in the most harmonious aspect, 120-degree trine to Saturn, which is all about structure. And it's all about discipline, and it's all about mastery. In addition to limitation, important to note, but really is about mastery and structure as well. And so to me, this transit really signifies getting a project done. And by project, I mean something that is structural, whether physically structural. So if you're looking at your own home and you have some sort of structural project, or car, since Mars does rule the car, something physically or like literally structural, but also something like a proposal or a roadmap. If you want to plan a road trip, like I said, Mars rules the car, something like that is very structural, that fleshes out a skeleton of something. This is really the energy to get it done. Outside of that, just take it at face value that this project in general, this is really the time to dive in and really flesh out exactly how you're going to tackle each step of it so that you can systematically go step by step to get it done. In my opinion, for like a literal structural project, there is a lot of energy around getting it done. And then for something more metaphorical, depending upon how big of the undertaking, nonetheless, there's supreme energy here to leverage. So the final transit of the month is the full moon in Libra, and it's a doozy. So let's take a look at the chart. So here's the chart for the full moon in Libra, which is occurring on March 28th at 11:48 a.m. Pacific, or convert for your time zone. And like I said, it's a bit of a doozy. So we have the sun and the moon at the same degree of opposite signs. The sun is in Aries because it's Aries season at 8 degrees. And then the moon is at 8 degrees of Libra. And as you can see, the sun isn't the only thing at 8 degrees of Aries. It is conjunct not only Venus in Aries, but also Chiron, the wounded healer. So the inflammatory quality that I mentioned of Venus in Aries, or that capability for it, is very, very likely with this full moon. Full moons illuminate, they shed light on, and with Chiron representing wounding and our deep-seated wounds, it is very likely that not only metaphorically or emotionally we're feeling this wounding, but there's the potential for the physical as well when it comes to inflammation. So I strongly recommend monitoring your diet around this time and not eating the foods that will really, really get you inflamed, or eating like actually even like super, super spicy foods too, if you're going to take this in like a medical astrology direction. But more so than anything, let's talk about the emotional component to it. I'll leave the physical to you and trust your judgment. Chiron is really all about turning our wounds into our why. That's what every astrologer says is like the beauty of Chiron, right? And given the fact that it's conjunct Venus, which is really tied to our self-worth and our sense of value, that is especially what's aligned with these wounds. I think unlike any other sign, given the confrontational nature of Aries especially, it's likely that the ways in which we're wounded are going to be are going to really hit us in the face and what we have to deal with. Full moons invite us to shed what no longer serves us, and it's easier said than done. So I think there is going to be a buildup that leads to the culmination of this full moon. So it could very well be that you're feeling this wounding within the week leading up to this lunation, even potentially like 10 days leading up to this lunation. And my hope is that you really meditate with this energy on the ways in which you can achieve that shedding. Outside of that, there are outlets that I can see in this chart that could potentially steer us in one direction or another. One of which is that there is an applying aspect of Venus in sextile to Saturn, which is all about structure and confronting our perceived limitations. It is also about confronting the reality of our situation and potentially going slower with things. So if all of that Aries energy and all of that Mars energy that was super gung-ho and all of that Pisces energy that was super dreamy is just telling you to like go, 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 maybe the outlet to this is pausing, is taking a break. I think about Jessica Lanyadoo, who actually says that inactivity is part of the activity itself. And to me, that resonates here as Saturn as the outlet here, is in accepting that rest day. Another personal example is I was so committed to playing so much tennis and working out so much. I never took that rest day, and I ruptured a tendon in my elbow. And 9 months later, I'm finally hitting a ball after surgery. And that's an example of not viewing inactivity as part of the activity. So potentially this full moon is inviting you to rest. If you've been taking the month of March and the start of Aries season as the time to really push yourself and put the pedal to the metal, internalizing the fact that the period of rest is actually not a negative, but rest is part of the activity itself. And that was your March 2021 monthly forecast. I'm happy to be your weatherman. Please subscribe below for more content, and follow me at my astrology Instagram, which is LYT_astrology on Instagram. See you next month.